Hello and welcome to RWR Plays TEW 2020. This is chapter 35 of WCW Lives On, the series where we are playing as Eric Bischoff as if WCW survived beyond the end of its actual existence in real life. We started the series in game time in May of 2001 with an episode of Nitro and then the Big Bang pay-per-view, and we're now made our way all the way to November and we're on the road to Uncensored as we speak. Now, before I recap what took place on last week's episode, I also want to point you in the direction of the subscribe button. If you've been enjoying the series, or if you think you might enjoy the series, having never watched it before, give us a subscribe and you can continue to follow along. And of course, if you also are joining in at this point, please go back and watch the previous 34 chapters because there's a whole lot of stuff that's happened to get us to where we are. Also, another thing that really motivates me to continue to make these videos is a like. So if you could click the like button below, that would be really helpful as well, just to keep me invested and interested in doing this series, because I am determined to get to Starrcade and potentially even beyond that, but a large part of going beyond that will be based on how many people still seem to be enjoying what I'm doing with these episodes. So, as I said, a quick recap then about what took place on the last episode. First of all, the Starrcade Series continued. We saw Scott Steiner beat Kurt Hennig and Sting defeat Mike Awesome, setting up a mouth-watering main event for this week's Nitro, as Sting will battle Scott Steiner and the winner will take Group A overall, which will mean they go through to the final of the Starrcade Series at Uncensored. Also in the Group B of the Starrcade Series, Ric Flair avenged his loss at Halloween Havoc with victory over Shane Douglas. So he gets the victory there, and there will be 2 group matches on this week's show as well. Also on last week's episode, the European Union became the new #1 contenders to the tag team title in a 4-way match and will now battle Totally Buff at Uncensored in 2 weeks' time. And DDP made it clear that he was unhappy with the way Booker T had spoken about him on the previous week's show and challenged Booker to confront him in the ring on this week's Nitro. So all kinds of stuff going on. Without further ado though, let's continue things with this week's Nitro. So as you can see, we are this week for Nitro in the Charlotte Y. Martin Center in Washington State. Don't know where exactly that is, but there we go. And we open immediately with a match, because straight after the opening titles, the camera pans to the ring where Sean O'Haire and Jester are stood ready for their confrontation. The commentators make it clear that Vampiro is not at ringside for this one, as he prepares for his Starrcade Series match with Ric Flair tonight. And as you can see, Sean O'Haire defeated Jester in 7 minutes 41 seconds by pinfall. During the match, we also had Prodigy run in and attack Sean O'Haire, but he dealt with him pretty easily and still got the victory. This gave us a segment rating of 64. Sean O'Haire had an in-ring performance of 53, which is really decent. Jester an in-ring performance of 60. He's actually, the former Hugh Morris is far better than I've perhaps booked him to sort of be. So a decent match this, and Sean O'Haire seemed off his game, so it could have been even better. Next up, ahead of the next match, Chronic tried to attack Goldberg, who was entering for a match against Shane Douglas in the Starrcade Series, but the Wyndham brothers, Kendall and Barry, come to the ring and they get rid of Brian Clark and Brian Adams as the 2 teams brawl away from the ring and out to the back, leaving Goldberg to face Shane Douglas in a one-on-one confrontation without interference. Segment rating here 56. Goldberg obviously massively over, so the fans were excited about seeing him. Kendall Wyndham underperformed, but a decent rating this one. It is then Bill Goldberg versus Shane Douglas in a match that goes 9 minutes and 9 seconds and is ended by pinfall when Bill Goldberg manages to spear and then jackhammer Shane Douglas for a segment rating of 77. Shane Douglas had an in-ring performance of 70, so he's still doing really well, but Goldberg is in a class of his own really in this respect. He got a 93. The match suffered a little bit because there was not enough selling shown, but Goldberg secures his second victory in the Starrcade Series in Group B. Next up, Sharmell Sullivan is backstage with Bobby Roode for an interview. Sharmell says that Roode demanded some TV time and so asks what this is all about. Roode says that he's not been booked in a calendar month for WCW and asks what kind of message it shows about WCW's commitment to developing young talent that the winner of its first ever Hot Prospects tournament isn't being given any matches. Sullivan says it's not her place to comment, but suggests he talks to Eric Bischoff, and Roode says that he already has, and has managed to get Bischoff to agree to him issuing an open challenge on Nitro next week, where he will be willing to face anybody on the roster. So a segment rating here of 31. Sharma Sullivan was poor. Bobby Roode clearly enjoyed having the freedom to go off script and performed well. I would suggest that the rating is more down to Bobby Roode's lack of overall popularity as opposed to his ability on the mic here. So not terrible, but not particularly great rating either. The next match is a tag team contest as Tommy Dreamer and Terry Funk take on the team of Mark Jindrak and Sean Stasiak. This one had a decent reaction from the crowd, but subpar wrestling. Tommy Dreamer and Terry Funk defeat Jindrak and Stasiak in 11 minutes and 28 seconds when Dreamer pins Jindrak. And Dreamer also carried the match in terms of in-ring performance. You can see his was a 62, whilst the others were all around 40 to 45. A segment rating, though, of 60, so that's pretty good as Dreamer and Terry Funk come out with a victory. After the contest, Dreamer and Funk are set upon by a pair of very large, identical twins, who Jerry Lawler informs us are the Headhunters. The Headhunters bloody both Funk and Dreamer with chairs and then finish them off with splashes from the top rope, leaving both men lying in the ring, down and badly hurt. So a segment rating here of 39. There needed to be a little more star power in the segment in order to successfully have Headhunter A fighting for that long. So both the Headhunters are obviously not particularly familiar to WCW audiences, but hopefully this was a good way to introduce them into the company. So next is another match in the Starrcade Series, this one in a Group B between Ric Flair and Vampiro. And Vampiro wins this when Prodigy distracts the referee by checking on how Vampiro is doing. And then with the referee's back turned, Shane Douglas appears at ringside and punches Flair with brass knucks, which then subsequently allows Vampiro to get the pin and give him the victory. So another really good match here, segment rating of 74. Ric Flair a 73, Vampiro a 67. Flair a bit down on what he usually is, in this game at least, in this save. And I think that's probably, I put that down to the fact that Flair was losing, so perhaps didn't have the same motivation for this one. But Vampiro getting a really big victory in his career in Group B of the Starrcade Series. And after tonight's matches, that means Goldberg has 2 wins with 6 points. Vampiro and Flair each have 1 win each with 3 points, and Shane Douglas has 0 points. Next up then, Curt Hennig is stood next to Sharmell Sullivan as she welcomes him for an interview backstage. She asks Hennig what's going through his mind after his first 2 matches in the Starrcade Series resulted in a loss. Hennig says that he's not going to lie, he's feeling pretty dejected at this point and says that he's got to snap out of it because next week in his final group match against Mike Awesome, he'll be fighting for Pride. So this was just a way to build up a match between Curt Hennig and Mike Awesome next week, which is part of Group A in the Starrcade Series. A segment rating of 55. Sharmell Sullivan was underwhelming, and but apparently enjoying having the freedom to go off script, and so was Curt Hennig. So the next match is mixed tag team action between Rey Mysterio Jr. and Alexis Laree against Great Sasuke and Kana. The commentators during this match hype up the Sasuke versus Mysterio contest set for Uncensored for the Cruiserweight title, and they also mentioned that Laree and Kana went to a time limit draw during their match a couple of weeks back in the women's title round robin. And on this occasion, Alexis Laree gets the victory over Kana when she pins her in 9:43. This one got a segment rating of 64. Rey Mysterio Jr. was head and shoulders above everyone else in terms of the match performance, although Sasuke was still a 67, so not bad from his perspective either. And Laree and Kana were involved in something a bit more important than they usually are, a little bit more high profile, and the fans were interested in this. And I thought this might be a good way of starting to get some of these women over with the crowd a little bit, given that they've been mainly confined to just the round robin matches, and that has meant that there's a limit to how much they can get over fighting one another when the crowd don't seem to know any of them. So after this, Bill Goldberg joins Tony Schiavone for an interview, and Schiavone asks how he's feeling now he's defeated Shane Douglas, that he's 2-0 in Group B, and he's just got Ric Flair to face next week. Goldberg says that he's feeling good and has his eyes on the prize. He says that next week when he faces Ric Flair, it'll be a great honour to step in the ring with him, and he knows Flair will be desperate to win because that would still give him the chance to make it to the final. Finally, he warns Shane Douglas not to get involved in the match or there will be hell to pay. Of course, Bill Goldberg referencing the fact that Douglas just cost Ric Flair the match against Vampiro. This was a segment rating of 70. So Goldberg looked like a real star in this segment. Tony Schiavone, by contrast, looked underwhelming. But yeah, this is probably the best talking segment we've seen Goldberg in, so that's a real positive. And then we get the main event match of the night. It is Scott Steiner versus Sting, a match that goes 20 minutes and 58 seconds and is eventually won by Steiner. This got a segment rating of 87, which I think makes it either the best or the second best match we've ever had. Steiner had an in-ring performance of 93, Sting an 87. This was a major match. We gave it plenty of time to play out and give people the kind of quality that they want. There is still, however, one major thing to take part on Nitro, and that is the confrontation between DDP and Booker T. And it starts with Tony Schiavone stood in the ring and welcoming the challenger for the WCW World Title Uncensored to the ring, DDP. Schiavone hands DDP the microphone when he gets to the ring, and DDP says that everybody knows why he's here and tells Booker T not to waste any more time. He wants to look him in the eye and tell him what's coming for him at Uncensored. This brings out Booker T and he walks to the ring too. DDP squares up to Booker and tells him that he saw 2 weeks ago that Booker T doesn't respect him and says that means he'll have to earn that respect the only way he knows how, through throwing these fists. He says Booker T underestimating him, however, is a good thing. He wants Booker T to underestimate him because at Uncensored, he's taking the title. Booker T responds by telling DDP that he does respect him and whatever he thought he heard 2 weeks ago, he misunderstood. But Booker tells DDP that if he wants to make this personal, he's got no problem with that, and DDP should get prepared to have his ass handed to him. So segment rating here of 80 as the two men kind of make their case for why they feel they were in the right or they're going to win the match at Uncensored. So a really decent rating. After this, the Canyon and Bam Bam Bigelow's music hits and they walk to the ring. As they're walking to the ring, the commentators remind the audience that Canyon and Bigelow offered DDP their friendship on WCW Saturday Night last week. Canyon tells DDP that all he has to do is say the word and they will take Booker T out for him. DDP says that this ain't about them, he never asked for their help and he doesn't need their help, finally telling them to get the hell out of here. Canyon and Bigelow make to leave, but then when DDP's back is turned, they attack him and he falls into Booker T. Canyon and Bigelow then fight with Booker and DDP for a bit until Booker and DDP overcome their attackers and throw them out of the ring. As Canyon and Bigelow retreat looking annoyed, DDP and Booker T are stood in the ring, but clearly still angered at the others' words towards them. So segment rating here of 73 to continue this sort of feud between Booker and DDP as we build up to Uncensored, and we obviously have delivered on Bigelow and Canyon's offer to help DDP and DDP rejecting them and them getting annoyed at that fact and sort of engaging in a battle with the two men. And that is how Nitro goes off the air. A pretty damn good episode of Nitro, undoubtedly. I mean, with three really good matches, in particular Scott Steiner versus Sting, an 87, possibly the best match we've ever had. Goldberg and Shane Douglas is right up there as well, a 77, and Vampiro versus Ric Flair wasn't bad at all either. The two sort of the big angle at the end with DDP and Booker T and Canyon and Bam Bam Bigelow, those two separate segments as I've booked them anyway, were both really decent as well. The show increased our popularity in all the regions we hoped it would, so yes, it's a big success altogether. So we still got to deliver on WCW Saturday Night, so we'll do that now. Okay, so it's time now for WCW Saturday Night, and this TV taping attracted a crowd of 3,281 in Washington, so a really decent showing there. And WCW Saturday Night begins with Tony Schiavone introducing footage of an incident which took place during Nitro this week that was not aired on Monday. It shows Conan and Jeff Jarrett in a brawl backstage as officials and other wrestlers tried to keep them apart. Got a segment rating of 60, so it's really decent here as Jarrett and Conan's feud continues. Straight after this, we got the first match of the night, Chaos Theory versus Elix Skipper and Kid Romeo. And this was a terrible match, according to the game, but it was won by Yoshihiro Tajiri for his team when he pinned Elix Skipper. Kid Romeo was the weak link, struggling to keep up with everyone else's in-ring performance. This one got a segment rating of 35, and as you can see, Tajiri, Whipwreck, and Skipper's ratings were all in the 40s, but Romeo down to 28. Yes, the Chaos Theory get the victory here. Next up, we have an interview as Sharmell Sullivan welcomes her guest at this time, Angel Orsini. Sullivan says that so far Orsini has 3 wins under her belt for 9 points, but trails Jazz, who is still undefeated and has 13. She says that next week they meet in their match in the women's title round robin and asks Orsini how she's feeling. Orsini says that she knows that next week is the last chance for her to have a chance at winning the round robin. She says Jazz has earned a 4-point lead in the tournament, and the only way she can win overall is by beating her next week, then winning again in the final round of matches and hoping Jazz loses that as well. She says that it's basically the last chance saloon on Saturday night next week. This is just to hype up Angel Orsini and Jazz's match with one another on next week's show. It got a segment rating of 25, not a particularly good rating. You can see here Angel Orsini was terrible with no script to follow. Her dialogue was a mess, but ultimately we got through it at least. Next up is Amber O'Neil versus Ronnie Stevens, another match in the women's round robin. This one only got a segment rating of 16. Neither Amber O'Neil nor Ronnie Stevens have really featured heavily in this in terms of their what's going on with them, particularly interestingly, and this one was won by Amber O'Neil by submission. After that, Sharmell Sullivan talks to Vampiro backstage, and she says that Vampiro got the victory over Ric Flair on Nitro and says that in the process he kept his hopes alive of winning Group B. Vampiro says that after he lost to Goldberg, everybody said he was out of it, but he's learned never to say never, and he says that next week on Nitro he'll take care of his side of the bargain, and he'll just have to wait and see what happens in the match between Goldberg and Flair. So segment rating here 58. Vampiro was a real star in the segment, but Sharmell Sullivan looked dreadful, unfortunately. The next match saw the Amazing Rig take on the Equalizer. The Equalizer, a blast from the past here in WCW. The Amazing Rig got the victory in 7 minutes and 24 seconds by pinfall in a kind of big man, little man contest, which wasn't particularly good because, first of all, nobody cared about these two wrestlers, and secondly, the Equalizer's got no stamina to speak of at all. I was warned that even putting him in a match that lasted 7 minutes was almost certainly too long for him. But whatever the case, the Amazing Rig picks up the victory here, and the segment rating was a very poor 19. Next, backstage for one last interview tonight, Sharmell Sullivan talks to the Wyndham brothers. She asks them whether when Kendall came back to WCW, it was always their intention to team up. Barry Windham says that they didn't have any plans, but they always will watch each other's back, and if Chronic want to mix it up, then they are on board. Kendall Windham adds that they will meet Chronic any place, any time for a match. So segment rating here 41 as the Chronic and Windham brothers storyline continues. And finally, the main event sees Alex Wright against Buff Bagwell. Obviously, the commentators talk about the fact that their respective teams face one another in a match for the tag team titles at Uncensored. Here, in a match that went for 13 minutes and 22 seconds, it ended in a double disqualification when both Lex Luger and Norman Smiley, their respective partners, got involved. Bagwell, a rating of 68, Wright, a rating of 42, an overall rating, though, of just 47, which is a shame. Alex Wright seeming off his game during this one. And then after the match, the two teams continue to brawl. Eventually, officials and referees try to separate them, and Saturday night goes off the air with this still taking place. Segment rating here 50. Luger and Bagwell look good, but Alex Wright was underwhelming again, so not a good night for Alex Wright. And that is WCW Saturday night as well. The entire TV taping is now being done, and not a bad show, not a great show, but again, as always, Saturday night doesn't really make a huge amount of difference to anything. It's just a way to give some people some matches, as I say every time, so I'm going to try and stop saying it in future episodes. And that is everything for this week's TV taping. We will just have a quick look at Raw and see what happened there. So again, only a show rating of 82, which is low compared to what we were seeing earlier in the save. There was a very, very good angle between Fit Finlay, The Rock, and Chris Benoit and Kevin Nash and the Hollies. How those 6 people are associating with one another is uncertain to me. Kurt Angle beat CM Punk in a really good match, but the main event was Edge and Christian defeating the APA to retain the WWE World Tag Team title. So they made a bit of a mistake in their booking there, because surely if Angle and Punk had been on top, it would have had a better overall rating, but there we go. So as I say, that is everything for this particular episode of WCW Lives On. Thank you very much for watching. As I said at the beginning of the show, if you've enjoyed today, please give us a like and please subscribe. It's always great to get your subscriptions, get your likes, keeps me motivated and helps the channel do as well as it possibly can. We've got small numbers on this channel, so it's always good to get a few more people involved. We'll be back hopefully with another episode relatively soon. We are kind of forging our way a path through to Uncensored quicker than we had done in the previous month or two, so that's really good news. I've had a tiny bit more extra time to do this just recently. Until then though, thank you very much for watching.